What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. We might have an actual thing to watch today with XO19. I can't believe it. I didn't know if it would be any good, but we're starting to hear some rumblings about what's going to be there, and I think it looks like Rare is going to have a brand new IP, a brand new game to show, as well as Obsidian. This is very interesting stuff. We're going to talk a bit about XO19, which is going to be later on today, so I guess make sure you check out for that. We'll, of course, have a summary here as well during Newswave. And then also, yeah, the Pokemon Sword and Shield reviews hit, and, well, there was controversy immediately based on some of the reviews. We got the Metacritic score and all kinds of stuff to go over there. As always, guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to like button. It does help out. And get subscribed so you can stay up to date on all the gaming news going on in the gaming world. We're going to start today with the Arcade Archives on the Switch. Now, Kung Fu is actually coming to the Switch this week, according to Hamster's PR. However, in Famitsu, we had a couple other games. One in particular I thought was really, really neat, Frogger. No real word on when Frogger is coming to the Switch through the Arcade Archives program that they have, but it's kind of neat to hear that we'd be getting Frogger. And they also have Hyper Sports that's also coming over again at some point. I do like the Arcade Archives, and Frogger is, I mean, that's a good game to have just kind of show up and come over. And no release date, that's the only thing. A lot of times they will announce these like way ahead of time in Famitsu, and then they'll just kind of drop it like 1 week. Like they'll announce it, right? Like we've heard about other games before announced and then dropped right away. Frogger's probably one that just showed up in Famitsu, and then hopefully before the end of the year we'll have it out on the Switch. But hey, Arcade Archives is bringing some pretty random but cool games to the system. Oh, and have you ever been sitting there in front of like your screen that has all of your games in front of you and you can't figure out what to play from your backlog? A lot of times that's how we build up a backlog, is because we can't even choose what to play, and we end up just playing maybe something new or a multiplayer game that just goes through the motions again. So what if there was a button that would just randomly pick one of your games from your backlog and launch it? Well, that's apparently something that Microsoft has been working on with the Xbox, as they put out a tweet showcasing the idea of having a surprise me button. I guess that's kind of like the I'm feeling lucky button that Google had, where you would click it and it will take you, I guess, to like the first page or whatnot. But this, I guess, would be a button you'd press and it would just randomly pick a game from your backlog. So anything in your library, it'll just launch it, and I guess you're playing that. Now, of course, you can immediately quit from it and keep pressing the surprise me button, I guess, until you get something you want. But I mean, I guess that's kind of a cool way to just kind of sit there and say, you know what, let's just see what happens. You press it, and hey, maybe it'd even pick out a game that you bought randomly on a sale. I mean, I guess that's better for Steam, technically, for that. But I mean, there are probably a bunch of games that they pick from. If they take that, and I guess they kind of integrate it into Game Pass even, where it'll pick it and it'll start downloading it, that would be a bit more interesting because of the large catalog. It's not necessarily something you've purchased, but it's something you may have seen and it'll just grab it for you. Also, we know Red Dead Redemption 2 has gone to PC. People have been playing it. There were some issues, and it looks like Rockstar has been working to kind of correct those issues. But one thing that always seems to happen when games go to PC is that they usually have their files gone through and people will data mine and check all the different things for possibly a catfish? Yeah, that's what's happened here. See, in the game, there's a mission where there's a legendary catfish that's like 180 pounds. The only problem is during the mission, you don't ever see the catfish. You just see the catfish pull the person into the lake. And it was this big deal for a while for people to see if they could catch it. Well, because it's on PC now, people have dug through the files, and here it is. And yes, it looks terrifying. It's apparently the catfish that is currently in Red Dead Redemption 2's files. It didn't really need to be completed, considering you don't necessarily see it ever. I guess it's just submerged and they used it as a placeholder, but I mean, they made part of a catfish there. But yeah, if you've been one of the people wondering about how to catch that catfish, I guess, you necessarily can't unless you just spawn it into your game. At least that's where they are now with it. But that's the one thing about PC games, or games when they go to PC, a lot of times they can kind of break some of these myths or these legends in these open world games like a Red Dead Redemption or like a Grand Theft Auto. And guys, some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start with XO19. That's later on today, and it sounds like they got a show here, and I'm excited for a couple things. One, it sounds like we're finally going to see those studios start to pay off for Microsoft in one way or the other. We'll at least get something new. That's the big thing. Obsidian Yeah, already Obsidian's going to be showing off a new IP, and Rare, that is the company that I think people are very, very interested in hearing about. It's a new IP, so I'm not expecting like a Banjo-Kazooie, nothing like that. It would have been cool, but I guess it's going to be something brand new that they've been working on. Now, of course, they've been the company with Sea of Thieves, so that's kind of what they've been working on. In fact, I will admit my expectations fairly low for XO19 before all of this went down. Now it's much higher because I would like to see Rare do something other than Sea of Thieves, right? And it looks like that's what's going to happen. So this is where this started up on Twitter. Daniel Med tweeted out, XO19 is worth watching tomorrow if you're a fan of Xbox Game Studios. The event will have solid 2020 release dates for XGS games like Bleeding Edge, Minecraft Dungeons, and Wastelands 3, and a new IP from Obsidian and Rare, and a shadow drop. The shadow drop ended up being Age of Empires 2, and then plus much more. This is exciting stuff for a couple of reasons. One, a new IP being introduced now means that it's probably going to be a Scarlett game, because it doesn't appear that those games that they're going to show us will be out in the next year. And we know this because another source decided to put out possibly what Rare's game could be. And this came from Video Game Chronicle, that talked a bit about how Rare is going to introduce a third-person adventure game that's not due out for a couple of years. This is going to be, what we're going to see anyway today, a game for the Xbox Scarlett. That's pretty exciting to start seeing what games they have planned going forward today for Scarlett going into next generation, and it's going to be Rare. Now, I will also be curious if they can create a new IP that is as intriguing as what Banjo did back during the N64, because I mean, Sea of Thieves didn't launch great. It wasn't as exciting. It's definitely built up momentum as it's gone along, and I'm sure they'll show more of it here because that's basically their games as a service game. And I'm also curious if this is just going to be a flat-out single-player, third-person adventure game, as we've seen Microsoft kind of lean into that games as a service like completely almost at this point, with a lot of their games being online connected. And I mean, we see Gears of War sitting there with microtransactions. It's kind of what Microsoft has been pushing for now. So to see Rare maybe do something a bit different, it's exciting. Also Obsidian. I mean, we just saw Obsidian do The Outer Worlds, and they've been working on that for a while now, right, with a separate publisher and all of that. So that, I guess, isn't the most surprising, because this could be a game that they just have a CG trailer set up, either of them, just to showcase what could be happening going into next generation. But man, Obsidian, Rare, a bunch of other games apparently that are actually due out for 2020, some Game Pass announcements. Yeah, I think we have a show today, guys, so you might want to tune into that. I'm actually not going to be around for it, so I won't be streaming it, but I will definitely be following up, and we'll be covering it, of course, here on Newswave, so if you want to make sure you catch up on all the news there, make sure you're subscribed. Next up, let's talk about these Pokemon Sword and Shield review scores. On Metacritic, when it first went up, it was about an 84. It jumped around very, very fast right away. I think it ended up at like 20-something reviews. The problem we had with this whole situation, a lot of review codes weren't sent out. They didn't. It had to do with leaks, and they decided to instead kind of limit the amount of copies that went out. I think they even delayed the embargo at one point. It was all over the place, but it did eventually. The reviews came out, and we had an 84. It dropped down to like an 80, and now it's sitting at an 81. And some of these reviews are interesting. IGN actually gave it a 9.3. That is currently the highest for this game, with other ones being lower in the 60s and 70s, but it happened to just average out to 81. And if you start looking through a lot of these reviews, there are some interesting reactions to this game, with some of them saying that, hey, the quality of life stuff that's added in, like just as an example, the fact that you can skip any and all tutorials in the beginning just by saying, I'm good to go, don't worry about it. That's big for a lot of veteran Pokemon players who don't feel like sitting around and listening to them show you how to do everything when it comes to capturing Pokemon, managing your inventory. Yeah, that, I understand, gets annoying in Pokemon, especially in the beginning. However, then we start to hear that some things feel dated, feel like they're like a decade old. And I mean, the biggest thing here is kind of the wild section, and that of course has the free moving camera, and that's a bit older, I guess you would say. I mean, they're excited about the camera being able to be moved around, but of course they've been on the 3DS like this whole time, so the fact that they even have a second analog stick that is by default there, rather than if you have it on like the 2DS or the regular 3DS, you don't have that I guess is a big thing for them. Now, I will say the Metacritic score is about where I thought it would be. I figure reviews would be about average so I figured they'd be like 80 to 85, somewhere in there, and average to just above average for a lot of reviewers. And IGN's may have been a bit high, I'll admit. I haven't played it yet, but it did seem like they were very, very excited just for the idea of Pokemon on a home console, the actual mainline one, not like Let's Go with new Pokemon. And so much so that it seemed like people maybe picked this out because it got hit with a lot of dislikes on YouTube. But hey, 81 for Pokemon Sword and I guess Pokemon Shield, because they're basically the same game with a few different Pokemon and a few different trainers and some other things. But I guess that's about what we would expect. Again, dated visuals, some quality of life additions, and a new region to explore. For some people, it's more Pokemon, and that's kind of what they wanted. We'll see what happens maybe next year or the year after. Maybe we'll get something with Diamond and Pearl. That at least should be a bit easier to do. But then when they eventually come out with like the next in the series, like the actual brand new Pokemon game, that'll be interesting. Next up, let's talk about the Famitsu sales charts in Japan. Very interesting stuff here because Death Stranding is in there. Take a minute, just think to yourself, how do you think Death Stranding did in Japan? Because it did pretty well. Let's take a look at the charts real quick. You can see actually Death Stranding at the top. 185,909 copies sold. The launch sales of Death Stranding, that is the biggest IP launch seen this generation yet in Japan. That is massive. Like that is big time. That's ahead of Judgment. That's ahead of Sekiro. That's ahead of Bloodborne, Days Gone, ARMS, Horizon, Octopath. That's ahead of all of that. And of course, we know Death Stranding launched on Friday, so that is very, very quick to pull all of that in. Here's the thing though, it's gonna be curious to see how it does going into next week to see if they plummet or drop off really badly. Below that, Luigi's Mansion 3 is sitting there at 54,680. Ring Fit Adventure, by the way, has quietly been rolling along here. That's actually up 2% from the week before, and I've seen this quite a bit online where Ring Fit Adventure is sold out very frequently in Japan, so that seems to be doing very, very well. It's definitely not another Labo situation where it was on the charts for like 2 weeks and then just disappeared completely. Nope, it's been hanging out in the top 5 for quite a while now. Persona 5 Royal below that at 4. Then we have, Need for Speed Heat. There it is at number 5. No microtransactions yet still, so good to see at least that charted and did okay in Japan at 16,306. EA has low expectations for that game, so we'll see how quickly it drops off of the chart here going forward. Call of Duty Modern Warfare below that at 6. Mario and Sonic Olympic Games at 7. Minecraft at 8. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe at 9. And then Super Smash Bros. Ultimate at 10. Moving over to the hardware, the Switch was at 88,772. That is a bit of a drop from last week. Of course, though, we're about to roll into the week with Pokemon, so yeah, you're gonna see that quite a bit. We're in that week now, but next week we'll see the results from it. The PlayStation 4 at 15,810 got a bit of a boost there, as we saw that from Death Stranding. The 3DS 1,774, the Xbox One dropped down to 64 units, and then the PlayStation Vita, somehow they're still scrounging up units, that's at 22. Hey, I mean, that's a big deal there for Death Stranding. It seems to be at least selling well from the limited numbers that we have right now when it comes to Famitsu. We'll see how it did in the MPDs. That's the one I'm real curious about because, again, Kojima kind of mentioned the reviewers in the US, North America is not really getting it. But we'll see how the consumers actually respond to Death Stranding. And I've started to come around a little bit on it. I'm still like in the middle for it. It's still not, I don't think, a Game of the Year contender. That's me personally, but I do see now why people really, really enjoy this game and might consider it that. However, hey, you know what? The sales surprised me a bit in Japan, and we'll see how they carry over to the North America and the US. Here's the other thing though, okay? The Switch is coming up on 10 million units in Japan already, and it might do it next week when we see the results of Pokemon that's taking place tomorrow. So that's a big deal for the Switch as well, and we'll keep up to date on that next week to see if they break that 10 million mark. And with our last bit of news, let's take a look at that cartridge for the PlayStation 5, maybe? This, of course, was the patent that Let's Go Digital found, and it looks like it's been updated, which tells me and many other people that it appears to be actually in development. Like, it is changing and altering pretty quickly. A few days later, we now have this. They added pin connectors. Yeah, the cartridge now has 12 pins for a total of 24 connectors, and these are new drawings that were updated days after Let's Go Digital posted the other ones. So it does appear that Sony is doing something with this patent, and I said before that it looked like it was just a shell, so maybe they were just trying to figure out how it would look encased in plastic. Well, now they're to the point where they're kind of setting up the pins and figuring out how that's going to look. The biggest thing here is, do they have a patent coming out anytime soon that shows the circuit board inside, or at least refers to it in some way, whether it's storage? Like, if it's an SSD like some of us are believing, that would be a big deal, and it'd be interesting to find a patent that does talk a bit more about the internals for it. Otherwise, though, something appears to be happening here. It's not just like a one-and-done patent. It's one that's being updated seemingly constantly now, so we'll see if it gets another update and get more information. Just keep an eye on this, because something is at least happening with Sony and cartridges in some way. And we'll finish up with comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This one is from Chi, saying, in general, Pokemon could be so much more, so much the argument. It has always been like that. It's Pokemon is just so wrong. Soon it'll be 2020. Honestly, I'm kind of scared how a Diamond Pearl remake will look at this point. So I think the Diamond Pearl remake will be probably smooth sailing for them, as they don't have to innovate too much. In fact, fans of Diamond and Pearl probably don't want a lot of innovation because they want it to be Diamond and Pearl. It's more or less going to be what happens when they are done their quote-unquote practice run, right, with what we're seeing now with Sword and Shield, and they go off to make their, we'll say, Sun and Moon, right? X and Y was considered like their practice run. Sun and Moon was a lot better in people's eyes when it comes to visuals and others. So that's kind of where we are now. The Sword and Shield, we've kind of seen what that is now. So years from now, whenever the next thing happens by them and they have experience on the Switch, there really won't be that excuse of, oh, they moved to another system. That's going to be the biggest test right there for Game Freak, if they can figure this out and make what people would consider a high quality product compared to what they're seeing with something like Sword and Shield with the visuals and animations. But it's going to be a couple years before we even find out. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit the like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about, whether it's XO19. What do you think that Rare and Obsidian are going to show? What's their new IP? Because it's looking at least very exciting if you're a fan of some of the older Rare games, or you really liked Outer Worlds. Now I'm really curious to see what they're working on. And hey, maybe Inside Xbox at XO19 will be a really good show. Also, what about those Pokemon reviews? Did you think IGN's was a little high, or do you think that was okay, and maybe the Metacritic is right where it needs to be? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.